minutes to do that 1 through 4, and I will be back with you shortly. All right, so all eyes on me. Bless you. I can tell this is a little bit hard to read, but this is a circle that is filled in. I know our copy machines are garbage. Sorry about that, you guys. I know makes it a little hard to read. I think it's a little easier on the paper. And you can tell it's like shaded to the left, hopefully, right? So for the inequality, the actual inequality piece, you're going to write x. If it's shaded to the left, that means that x has to be less than -5. And then because that coordinate is filled in, there should be an equal to. So x is less than or equal to -5. Interval notation, because it is going forever in the left direction, that is going to be a -infinity. And because the right side of your interval is a -5 and it is filled in, it's an equal to. You should have a hard bracket just like that. So -infinity, -5. For number 2, I can tell it's still a little hard to read, but this is an open circle this time, and it's shaded to the right. It's hard on my overhead. Sorry about that, y'all. So for the interval, you've got +5, and you're going to put a soft parenthesis around it because that is an open circle. And because it is going forever to the right, it's going to be infinity, and infinity always gets a little soft bracket. And in this case, x is greater than 5. Since it was an open circle, there is no equal to underneath there. The two that I think are probably a little more challenging are the ones that are the compound inequalities. And on my side, it's kind of hard to see again. So you've got 2 filled in circles. I'm going to do the interval notation first because I feel like that's the part that's easiest for you guys, or at least that's the ones you seem to always get right easier. So the left side of your interval is a 1. The right side of your interval is a 4. When it is an and, you don't need 2 separate intervals. It should just be 1, because you can tell there's just one space that's like shaded in between those. And then last but not least, it's the part that's really hard to write too, is to come up with the inequality yourself. So I think of it as, hey, the inequality is in between 1 and 4, right? So that means x is going to be in between 1 and 4. And because they are filled in, we need to add those equal to signs. So that's what the inequality would look like if it's an and situation. And then last but not least, these are open on your alls, right? Man, oh no, this one's closed, right? That's so hard to read on my picture. Sorry, I had to take like a secondhand picture and put on here because the internet's not working right now. So you've got 2 separate intervals this time. So to represent this one, because it goes forever in the negative direction, that's going to be a -infinity. Because that interval stops at -2, it's going to be a -2 on the other side of your interval. And it's going to be a soft bracket because that circle is open. You need a second interval because you've got a gap here, which means you need a whole second interval. So the left side of that interval is a 1. It veers off in the positive direction forever. And to make sure you've got those 2 connected, you need to put that capital U right in between them. So when it's an and, you should just have 1 set, but when you do the or, you need to have 2. Same thing with the inequality. You need x is less than -2, or x is greater than or equal, not to 4, my bad, to 1. So when it's an or, you've got to have 2 separate pieces. When it's an and, you've got to have just 1 interval there together. Okay, before I start a timer to have you do number 5, 6, and 7, I can see why the wording is going to be a little bit confusing. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, you're going to have one exactly like this Thursday, okay? So I'm telling you about this common mistake for a reason. Okay, so just number 5 real quick. A lot of people think It must be within 3 to 52 degrees. First of all, if the weatherman can't predict whether it's going to be 3 or 52 degrees, that's pretty bad weatherman, that he's like off by 50. That's not what this question is saying. It's not saying it could be between 3 and 52. It's saying within 3 of 52 means it could be 3 more than 52, or it could be 3 less than 52. So within basically means plus or minus 3. So what you'll do to figure out that range, so you'll do 52 minus 3, which is obviously 49, and then 52 plus 3, which is 55. So use those two numbers as your, like, what the temperature could be. Same thing for this one. When it says 8 points within 8 points, it means it could be 8 points bigger or smaller. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to turn that into an inequality and interval notation. And you could debate reasonably about whether within includes, like, whether it's equal to or not. Because some people would say, well, within means that it's like in between them, so it doesn't include them. I'm not trying to test you over like tricky stuff. As long as it's written correctly, I'm not going to be too stressed about whether you decide to do equal to or include it or not. So I personally think when it says within, that does include 49 and 55, but that's just my interpretation. I'm not going to be very picky about that Thursday. So I'm going to give y'all a minute, like probably about 5 minutes to be exact. Turn those into an inequality and interval notation. Keep in mind, these are both and. If it's between two numbers, did I do something wrong? Zoom out? Yep. Like right there? Yep. All right. So if the weatherman predicts that it'll be within 52 degrees, we are within 3 of 52. So that means it can be from 49 to 55. So the inequality will literally be the temperature. Oops. I'm just going to say X. I'm going to be boring. Can be greater than or equal to 49 and less than or equal to 55. So it's going to be between those two temperatures. Whether you put an equal to sign or not, that's the least of my worries, because again, semantics, word-wise, I get you can make the argument for whether it includes it or not, so I'm not going to take that too seriously for this particular one. The interval notation, I'm going to stick with my belief that it means equal to, but again, I don't really care, so it can look like that. Okay, for number 6, if she scores within 8 points, so 92 minus 8 is going to be 84. 92 plus 8 will be 100. So if we're within 8, that means that X has to be greater than or equal to 84 or less than or equal to 100. So it's in between those two values. And for your interval notation, hard bracket if you're doing my version, but if you did a soft bracket with this, that will be fine on Thursday. Last but not least, it says they expect attendance to number within 25 of 87 students. Man, that ain't much of a dance. All right, so 87 take away 20. I mean, it's not. 87 take away 25 means there could be like 22 kids that, 62 kids that show up. Would help if I could subtract basics. And if you add 25 to that, what is that, 112? Yeah. So that means X needs to be between 62 and 112. Again, I don't care about the equal to sign because I can see your argument. And 62 to 112. Okay, for numbers 8, 9, and 10, all you have to do is solve them. So you don't need to worry about graphing them and doing the interval notation part. So just solve them. I will say it'll behoove you, because there are some multiple choice on this particular quiz for the first time in a while. The variable is always on the left. So you probably want to get used to, just like a typical standardized test, it's there on the left. So I'm going to shut up for a minute, give y'all a few minutes to try 8, 9, and 10. So you're going to solve them. Don't worry about graphing. And I will be back. If you choose to get rid of dividing by 3 first, I'm noticing this in a few places, which is why I wanted to stop and make sure I say something. This is the same struggle we have had since we first started doing these months ago. If you choose to get rid of that division first, you have to make sure that you remember to multiply everything by 3, not just these two right here. Okay? That is why, even though there's nothing wrong with doing it that way, I typically will not start with the division, because when I was in your shoes, I used to forget that part all the time. So if I were you, I would get rid of that extra guy right there first. How do you get rid of a +3? We do it with a -3. And you need to do it on the right-hand side of the equality sign as well. So that's going to leave me with -2/3 f. I like to bring down the symbol because it keeps me from screwing up if I keep it lined up. -9 minus 3 is -12. So now I will cancel out the dividing by 3. I noticed a couple of you guys canceled out, you multiplied by -3, which nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to multiply it by regular 3 to start. So multiply both sides by 3. Those will cancel. I'm not just left with a 2f, I'm left with a -2f. And what I do on one side, of course, I need to do on the other side. To cancel out that -2, don't you dare tell me I'm going to add 2. What am I going to do instead? Divide, right? Because it means multiplication. Okay, so I'm going to divide both sides by -2. I've got f and 18, and what happens when you divide by a negative number? You got to flip that inequality symbol around. And the variable is already on the left-hand side, so you don't need to worry about that if that happens to be a multiple choice question. It's really not that terrible. What's going to get you guys, because it's the same thing that gets people every single time, it's going to be remembering to flip when you've got a negative number. And then on number 9, for some reason, in my class when the advanced that has already done this, a lot of people were doing this for questions like number 9. It's like we forgot how equations work. Why can't I do that? They're not on the same side of the symbol, right? So you can't put those together. The advanced class had a lot of people who just all of a sudden forgot how to solve equations. I guess because the inequalities were like messing them up. I don't teach advanced. I just do regular and honors. I want to say it was like 6th or 7th, but we talk about like what messed them up, so that. Went a lot slower. Like, we won't get to this for like another 2-3 weeks. But it's the same stuff. And we won't do interval notation either. Well, actually, I have several kids that should be in honors that refuse to move. So I make them do some of the honors stuff because regular is too easy for them. All right, so back to the matter at hand. Oh, yeah. So I do have variables on both sides. So one of them is going to have to disappear. It really doesn't matter which one you get rid of. I personally would get rid of the 2p because if you get rid of the 3p, you would have to do minus 3p on both sides, right? Which means that 2p take away 3p is going to give you a negative. Remember how I try to stay away from negatives because that's when I make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with doing negatives. It's just that I make a lot more mistakes when negatives are involved. So I'm going to take away the 2p. So minus 2p on both sides. So that's going to cancel. That's going to leave me with the 5. If I have 3 p's, but I take away 2 of them, I'm left with 1 p, which is really just the same thing as a p. 1 p just means the same thing. And then I'm going to bring down that minus 10. How do I cancel out that minus 10 with a plus 10? So you've got 15 is greater than or equal to p. There are several multiple choice questions on the quiz. So get used to putting the variable first, even though it technically doesn't matter, because that's how it's going to be on the quiz. So when you look for a multiple choice answer, don't look for that. The inequality is kind of flipped around, but the sign did not get flipped, okay? So you got to make sure when you're looking for the right answer, zoom in. The alligator was eating the variable, the alligator's turning its back on the variable to start, right? So you better be looking for an answer where the alligator is still turning his back on the P. Make sure you flip the whole thing around, because on multiple choice, that's going to make it easier for you to see the right thing. Anybody need another minute to do number 10? Are you ready for me to work that for you? It looks like most of the people, oh, actually several people. So I'm going to give y'all a minute to try to, number 10 is very similar to number 9. So y'all try that one now. I'm going to shut up for a minute and I'll be back. Got a variable on both sides. You need to get rid of one. Personally, I would get rid of the negative because it's going to keep me from having to flip and stuff. So minus 2k, I get rid of with a plus 2k. That leaves me with 6k plus 15 is greater than 3, because the 2k's are going to cancel. Take away 15. So I've got 6k is greater than negative 12. And divide both sides by 6. Sorry, dear. K is greater than negative 2. Remember, I don't need to flip it because that number was a negative, but it's all about this number and whether or not it's a negative. So tomorrow we will work. You do not need to take this home for homework. We'll do this and the few problems left on the back. We'll do basically the second half tomorrow. Although there is, okay, so everybody should be looking up front now because you don't know if your number 11 is right. Now it's time to check. Okay, so we need to distribute. Well, you actually could divide both sides by 2 if you wanted to, but I think what most of you guys probably did was distribute. So 2 times negative 3m is negative 6m, and 2 times negative 5 is negative 5. I'm going to bring down everything else. Oh, I'm on crack. See, Chloe, that was a test, and you passed. Good job, boo. Good job. All right, so now I need to get rid of that minus 10 with a plus 10. And so that's going to leave me with negative 6m. I always bring this symbol down in between each step because that was the part I always messed up. Negative 28 plus 10 is negative 18. And finally, don't add 6. Divide both sides by negative 6 so that m, and you've got a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And because I had to divide by a negative number, I need to flip that inequality symbol around. So it should be a less than or equal to instead of a greater than or equal to. Didn't ask us to graph or anything for this one. Anybody not okay if I go over to number 12? Oh, I got it. I was looking at 12. All right, so number 12, same deal. We're going to distribute. That's going to be negative 6w minus 6. Over here, I'm going to distribute 2, so 2w plus 10. I don't know why, but every single class so far, people keep trying to put these together, even though they're not on the same side of the equal sign. It's like all of a sudden we forgot how to solve an equation because we moved into inequalities. I personally would get rid of the minus 6 because that way, if you get rid of the minus 6w, that takes away the negative, and that keeps me from having to remember I got to flip my symbol around because that's when I screw up, is when you throw negatives into the mix. So even though you could get rid of the 6m or the 6w or the 2w, I would have gotten rid of the 6w, although it really doesn't matter. So bring everything down. 2w plus 6w is 8w plus 10. I need to isolate my variable now that I'm down to only 1. So that gets me negative 16. And finally, divide both sides by 8. So I am not going to flip this inequality around, even though there was a negative number, because remember, it's all about what number you divided by. You do not flip that symbol if the number you divided by was not a negative number. And because there are going to be several multiple choice questions tomorrow, get in the habit of looking for the variable on the left.
I did the whole equation wrong. Is that the right answer?
Oh.
Well, okay, so what had happened is
Don't do it that way. If you flip the inequality symbol around, make sure that you flip the whole thing. So it should be w is greater than negative 2. So make sure when you're looking at that multiple choice tomorrow that when you look to see the variable on the left, that you've got it facing the right way. Last but not least, number 13. Same thing, we're going to distribute. So 2q minus 6 plus 6. Okay, the other thing I saw people doing wrong in my previous classes, because we finished the study guide yesterday, because we don't have to deal with that test to play crap testing in the morning here. So Everybody else got to finish this yesterday. So you guys actually get the privilege. You never get to be the last class I do stuff with. Now I can tell you where everybody else screwed up. Everybody else has been screwing up by doing that. Okay? So they try to cancel out that -6 with a +6, but because the -6 and the +6 are on the same side, they're just going to cancel each other out, correct? Because -6 and +6, you just add them together and they cancel. Okay, so 2q is less than or equal to -10. Divide both sides by 2. And we do not need to flip because the 2 is not negative, so that is just going to be a -5. All right, I'm going to set a timer again and give you, let's see, so we're going to do 14, 15, and 16. There are some issues with 14, 15, and 16. I'm not trying to throw... One of the other algebra teachers made this, and there's a couple of mistakes once we get to the back page, which I didn't make it. He saved me time, so I'm not complaining. But like on number 14, pretend that all of your, pretend that those numbers on the number line have negatives in front of them. So on number 14, you're not going to see the correct number that you need. Add negatives to that number line. And then on number 16, you're going to need to add a number also. So for number 14 and number 16, here, I'll write you a note. You did not do something wrong when you saw 14 and 16. They don't have the right numbers on the number line. And we're just not going to do number 17 because number 17's a special case that we don't need to do. So I'm going to give you about 5, 6, 7 minutes. Do 14, 15, 16. Your numbers on number 14, the right numbers will be there. That's really ugly, but you know what I mean. And then number 6, you need to add numbers going this way. So if you do that, you'll have the right numbers on your number line. Green, please, and thank you. So you can check and make sure you did it correctly. Are you okay, boo? Okay, just want to make sure you're right. All right, so if this were a regular old equation, technically you could divide by -2 first. I typically don't do that. I'll typically just get rid of the extra guy first. So get rid of that extra 12, get rid of that -12 with a +12 on both sides. That leaves me with a -2 is greater than or equal to 60. And I'm going to divide both sides by -2. I got to flip it because I divided by a negative number, which is why this number line was wrong, because we needed a -30. And because it's got an equal to sign, we're going to color it in. And we're going to shade to the left, because that's where all the numbers that are smaller than -30 are. Number 15 is pretty much the exact same problem. We're going to get rid of that -12 with a +12 again. That's going to leave me with -64. And divide both sides by -4. In case you can't tell, you're probably going to have to flip an inequality symbol tomorrow. Why are we doing so many negatives today? Hint, hint. Okay? Don't forget that. So n is greater than +16.
Just a quiz over this stuff. Right?
Just a quiz over this. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It ain't midterms.
Because going up would be less.
Well, so, oh, I see what you're saying. So, that's fair. Just adding the negatives on that number line actually make it jacked, right? Because this would say 26 is smaller than 30. Yeah, you're right. Mathematically speaking, that's technically not correct. Yeah, we're going to assume, though, that we put the numbers in the right order. That should be like 30, -31, -32. But yeah, you're not wrong, sir, at all. Yeah, that's a good point. Me just adding negatives on there still did not make that number line correct. Good point, sir. Good point. All right, so number 15, we're still going to leave it open because there's no equal to, and because n is greater than 16.
Why'd you write 15?
Oh, my God. Because, yay, Luca passed the test, too. Good job, Luca. Everybody's passing tests today. Good job, good job. All right, last but not least, number 16, for the love of all that is good and holy. I'm so tired, y'all. Please stop doing that. Okay? You need to divide by -2. So negative divided by a negative is a positive. And you know that you need to flip your inequality because you divided by a negative number. If you have one like this that's going to be multiple choice, the G will more than likely be on the left-hand side though. So make sure it's not like that, okay? The alligator was turning its back from the G. So you got to make sure when you flip it around that the alligator is still turning its back on the G. Which means that's why we had to add numbers because of the equal to sign. And sorry, I know this is messier than crap, y'all. So because of that equal to sign, it's a filled in circle. Because of that less than, we're going to shade to the left-hand side. I know, whew, that is ugly. Do we all understand what I mean? All right, skip 17. 18, 19, 20. We've got ands and ors. Yeah, 17 is a special case that, like I said, I took it from another teacher, and after I went through and worked it, I was like, it's a special case, but honestly, there's no need for it. It's a weird one. So 18, 19, 20. I'm gonna give you a little bit of time, and actually, I'm gonna show you for number 9 because 19 and 20 are similar. The part that people always have been messing up on these ands, guys, is right here. So I'm going to show you just how to set up number 19. So remember, you've got to separate it. It's like two inequalities that are like joined together, right? So when you do those two separate inequalities, when you like separate it, you got to separate it like this. That 3w plus 3 needs to be on both inequalities, okay? When you separate them into two separate parts, into two separate inequalities, that 3x plus 3, that middle piece needs to be with each one. And number 20 is the same way. So that one I did kind of want to show you, remind you how to set that one up. That middle part needs to be a part of both of those inequalities when you set them up. Okay, now, and remember the difference in an or. Remember what a graph of an and should look like. Remember what an or should look like. Each one of these is asking also for interval notation in addition to the graph. So please do that. And I'm going to give you some time to do that, and I'll be back. So we're finishing it out, guys. Same. I'm like so jealous. Actually, 18. Sorry, there's like a hair or something in my mask. That's like, yeah. So no 17, skipping, going right to 17 is kind of a weird special case that frankly you don't really need to know how to do. Okay, so number 18, because it's we're just gonna solve them as two separate inequalities first. So I'm gonna zoom in here. So you would just do a -2 on both sides. 3a is greater than or equal to 3. And we're gonna divide both sides by 3. So that a is greater than or equal to 1. Over here to the right, we've got variables on both sides. So I personally would go ahead and get rid of a variable. I would get rid of 2a because it's smaller and it's going to keep me from having to deal with a negative number. So that's what I personally would do. So 2a, do 2a on both sides. So that 7 is still sitting there, so I got to bring that down. If I have 3 a's, but I take away 2 a's, that's going to leave me with 1 a. And then I've got a 6 on the other side. Subtract 7 from both sides. So a has to be greater than or equal to 1, which means it should be going that way. Or it's got to be smaller than -1. So it was an or. So you should have two distinct directions for it to be an or. Anybody not okay if I go to 19? Okay. I am recording this too for you guys, by the way. All right, so I already separated them. -3, -3. 9 is less than 3w. Divide both sides by 3. So 3 is less than w. Do the same thing over here. You're going to have exactly the same steps. You're just going to have a different result. Oh, I divided instead of subtracting. My bad. Telling you, I'm just testing you. All right, so W has to be greater than 3, but smaller than 6, which fits with, and because there's an equal, I'm going to make that one a solid. And it makes sense. It's got to be bigger than 3, but smaller than 6, which means it's going to be that space right in between 3 and 6. And, oh, sorry. Everybody good before I go to do number 20? Okay, so for number 20, the hard part is getting that separation correct. So it's -3 is less than or equal to 2p minus 5. Then you need that same 2p minus 5 to be less than 11. We're going to add 5 to both sides. That leaves me with 2 is less than or equal to 2p. Divide so that p, we don't have to flip or anything, so p is greater than or equal to 1. Add 5. 2p is less than 16. Divide both sides by 2. P is less than 8. So it's got to be greater than 1, and because of that equal sign, I'm going to make it a solid. And it's got to be less than 8, which means it's going to be that spot right there in between, which makes sense for an and. All right, y'all, if you understood what I was doing there, you're going to be just fine tomorrow.